We'll give everybody a couple more minutes to find the room. While we're waiting, with the post-it notes on the table, I want you to all take one and think about the clinical supervision that you do and write down one word that describes it. You're looking at, what, like just one word? No, yes, just one word. 2 maximum.
Okay, it'll be 2.
And if you might, I'm going to take those post-it notes back, so just leave them on the table, but just so you know, because also you'll stick them on your piece of paper, you know. I'm going to take them back.
Thank you.
Office on there. Edwin, I'll see your face, so I'm like, I recognise that guy, I don't know where he's from. Look at the list. So, you know, you taught when I was at uni.
Yes, I probably
Yeah,
did.
There's
There's a couple of people here that
That's
We
uni.
went to uni together, Macarthur.
a long time ago.
That's what I was thinking.
I've been to 5 universities.
Wow.
Yeah, I probably taught you
It's a uni.
at Sydney University.
Yeah, because like.
You attended some of my kidney transplant
There
lectures.
you go.
No, you just been doing health, I think you did. I
Pardon?
think you meant mental health, I think you did.
Yeah, I did both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like, I knew that guy, and I was looking down with
It was a long-
Edward, it's your way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm already.
It's all the same.
The way that we got on was also really different.
I thought it was like a
problem based. They were
Problem
high
based,
level. Experimental group.
I remember when they were doing the bit about laying out a dead body.
Yeah.
They decided to lay me out, and some smart bugger went and got a bucket of water and took it over.
As if you're alive.
I said, I'm alive.
Because we did, because there was a new kind of
We used to
body
do
that they were
that,
teaching.
yeah.
And we used to go and wash each other. So you had to wash somebody else you'd never washed before.
Yeah, well, I
I
started
don't know if
washing
you had to
you.
do it. Yeah.
And then I got cannulas stuck on my arms and legs and everything.
It's too experimental. Yeah, no, and being young.
Yeah.
I really thought that was one the other day.
How funny, I know.
Yeah.
And she had what looked like an IV
Great. Yeah.
but it was only stuff.
Taped.
You know what they used to do? They used to put cannulas in her arms, and everywhere else you could stick a cannula. Then they'd say, now you do it to the next person, and they just swap over. So you'd be walking around for an hour with these cannulas stuck in everywhere. I'm glad they didn't go down the catheter path. I was going to no!
Just on the post-it note, you're here for the clinical supervision session, yes? So have a seat, welcome. And there's a sign-on sheet somewhere, just make sure that you sign on. And just on the post-it note, write one word that describes the clinical supervision that you do. You can have 2 maximum, but I'm keeping it short.
It was a mental
Yeah,
health
they used
one.
to film
And
us.
I remember sitting there, and I said to the teacher later, I said, there's nothing wrong with that person. And there was nothing wrong with them. It was a dummy one that they stuck in the old one in. Just to trick me. There's nothing wrong with them.
See if we could pick it out.
Yeah,
Okay, so we might get started because that leaves us more time to have conversation during this thing. So welcome to the leader session on clinical supervision. Jennifer Davids, who actually organises this, apologises, but she's on a flight to France, so
He doesn't.
What a choice. Congratulations. I should be on
I
it with
know.
her.
That's what I said to her when she told me. Pardon?
I should go
Sorry,
home.
she can't come.
She is very sorry that she can't come. That's exactly right. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Roslyn Tobin. I am a midwifery educator here at Westmead, and I work across the district. And she has requested that I do this session on clinical supervision. Okay. So, first of all, what is so clinical supervision? If you type that into any sort of search engine and you come up with all of the things that come up, clinical supervision all the evidence says clinical supervision correlates with better patient care, greater satisfaction for health workers, less burnout, less sick leave, less attrition, better safety records, all those sorts of things. But when you read through some of that evidence, and all that's great evidence or whatever, clinical supervision is a nebulous sort of term. Do you not agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So everybody has a different version of clinical supervision. So the question I'm going to ask you, and I want you to sort of talk about that, is what is clinical supervision? So what do you think clinical supervision is? And that's why I've asked you to write that one word that describes your clinical supervision.
Supervising someone in an environment that's clinical.
So it needs to, in a clinical environment for you, yep.
Protected space.
Protected space, yeah.
In order to, vent your feelings and bring meaning and awareness,
Okay.
insight, and then it's in a confidential, protected, safe zone.
Yeah.
Reflection.
Reflection, yes. What else?
I've seen it used as management abuse.
Yes, it can be used as a form of management, of performance management. Yep, absolutely.
In the wrong sense it was used.
It depends. It depends on the supervision. But let's just assume, without going into the particular forms, there are some forms that are about performance management. Yes. What else?
It's an opportunity for self-reflection. and
Self-reflection?
improvement of practice.
Yes.
I said educating, but I guess, that's for yourself. but
Yeah,
also-
learning.
Educated? There's no wrong answers here. I'm just trying to get a feel of what you're thinking clinical supervision is. So, education, yep.
I said life-saving.
Life-saving.
Professional sense, just
Okay.
to be able to debrief in a safe space and,
All right.
yeah.
So part of your professional development. Yep. What else? You had reflection. Okay. So there are lots of forms of clinical supervision out there, and you're all from nursing, yes?
Yes.
So we have particular forms of across nursing, but interdisciplinarily there are many more forms. Okay. So what I did is, just like I asked you to write down one word that describes supervision for you, I asked a number of people, and this is what I came up with. Like, these are the words that various people associate with clinical supervision. So as you can see, there's quite a broad range. Now, these people weren't all nurses, and they weren't all clinicians. Some of them were management, some of them were, like, as I said, from other disciplines. Some of them were risk management people. There's a whole range of people in there. So it's just to bring forward the fact that there is a whole lot of clinical supervision out there. And in my career, this is one of my interests. Clinical supervision has always been one of my interests. And over the years, I have both attended and been a supervisee and a supervisor in a variety of settings around clinical supervision. I've done formal and informal training on it. So there's and for a while there, if you can become quite confused by what's meant there. Okay. But what I have found in all my reading and my thinking about it and reflecting on it is that there are three main archetypes of clinical supervision. Does anyone know what they might be?
Normative, restorative.
No. You're
I'm thinking.
Mandatory?
mandatory. Some of them are, but not them. What I'm thinking is that there's a skill acquisition element. So that's at the bedside, doing the teaching, that sort of stuff. There is the professional development, clinical supervision, which is what, and then there's the reflective practice stuff as well. Okay, all of them have valid but different meanings for both the supervisor and the supervisee. Would you agree? Yeah. Different places, different formats. what I would like you to do is, if you are a person who does mostly skill acquisition, stand up for me. So if your clinical supervision is mostly around skill acquisition, stand up. It's okay, no, don't be afraid. I'm just trying to, you know, that sort of stuff. If yours is mostly around professional development, raise your hand. Okay. If yours is around reflective practice, that must be the rest of you. Or, are you doing, how many of you are doing more than one type? Absolutely, yes, yeah, okay. So, as supervisors, we're not, very rarely are we refined to one archetype, okay. So then when Jennifer said to me, can you do clinical supervision, I thought, clinical supervision in an hour, well, you know, that's, you know. But sitting down, I thought, well, if these are our three main archetypes, and a lot of supervisors do all of them, then what is it that as supervisors we need to be focused on? So I stopped and I thought, what are the core principles of effective clinical supervision, no matter what the archetype? Obviously there are principles that we all work under that make our supervision more effective. Otherwise, no one would be doing it because it wouldn't be effective. So what do you think are some of the, for you, what are some of those core principles?
Confidentiality.
Confidentiality, yep. What else? Sorry? Respect, yes.
I think evidence-based, maybe.
Evidence-based, yes.
And like, I want to keep up to date with stuff.
Yep, up to date, yeah. Collaboration, yes.
Relationship building.
It needs to be a relation building, yeah. Collaboration and respect, yeah.
And empowerment.
And empowerment, yes. Yeah.
I just went through the book.
You did.
And
And when I was thinking, I was putting down, I thought the core values that we espouse are actually the core values of all forms of clinical supervision. For me, anyway. But looking through the readings and doing a bit of research and whatever, I came up with 4 that are fairly universal to most types of clinical supervision. So for any version of clinical supervision, the first one is that it needs to be respectful. If there is not respect between the supervisor and the supervisee, then it's not going to be very useful. It needs to be safe. It needs to be collaborative, and it needs to be constructive as well. Would you agree?
yeah.
Feel free to disagree if you think.
No.
Is there anything else that you feel, in a burning way, you feel needs to be added to those?
I guess it's something weird to say, but I guess that you both get something from it.
Yeah.
That like it's a reciprocal relationship. That like yeah, mutual benefit. Yeah, it's both the person.
Yep. And I agree absolutely with you, and I think that's where the collaborative, that comes into both collaborative and constructive as well. But absolutely, it needs to be a two-way street. You need to get something out of it. So, let me ask you this then. What are the, for you, in your supervision, what does that look like for supervision? So a respectful, safe, collaborative and constructive place of supervision, what does that look like for you in your practice or in your supervision?
People who are keen to come.
Yes, absolutely.
Empowering. It's empowering.
It's empowering, yes.
Polite.
Polite, yeah, absolutely.
I think a cup of coffee in a non-intimidating environment.
Yep.
Somewhere
So relaxed.
relaxed.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. For some forms, it has to be that it's much more effective if it's more relaxed. It's out of the clinical environment. You know, that sort of stuff. But even if it's not you know, you can't do it over a cup of coffee because that is, you know, if it's a, say, a skills acquisition one, obviously that can't be done over coffee. But it doesn't mean that it can't be relaxed.
Yeah.
You know, it like that sort of environment of non-threatening sort of environment. Does that make sense? Yeah. Would you agree?
Yeah.
You all need to speak up so the camera can hear you, okay?
What camera?
That camera.
Are we being filmed?
I'm being filmed.
Sorry.
All right. It's just so that other people who couldn't make it today can
Okay.
can view the session. Okay. Anything else?
I think a lot of people are fearful of clinical supervision
Why do you think they are fearful?
because it's like, I tend to think that they feel it's like a punishment thing. You have to have clinical supervision, and they start going away thinking, what have I done? What's the issue?
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? And they get all worked up before they go in.
Yeah. And why do you think that is? What contributes to that fearfulness?
Probably when they were young and they were high school and we had to send them to a school principal or something.
Yes. There's that whole concept of you're off to the principal's office. Yes.
There was some old models of clinical supervision running in mental health as well, though, that weren't respectful or empowering or anything else. It was much more. Well, it was often a way of extracting information out of staff that could be used later for other situations. So, yes, people actually then associated the word with a lot of negative aspects.
Yes.
And now, even like years and years later, that you're trying to put it in, it's actually, the scars.
It reverberates with them in a negative way.
Yeah.
Historically, it has not been, you know, there have been situations and places and that sort of stuff where the practice hasn't been maintained at its optimal level and it's turned into something completely different.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And a good example of that is in the UK. For midwives in the UK, they've had to have clinical supervision for some time now. And the idea was that they had to participate. If they weren't participating in clinical supervision, they couldn't re-register. So in the initial stages, it was about the reflective stuff, reflect on practice and that sort of stuff. But then it sort of deteriorated into everyone just before registration would find a supervisor, which was usually often their manager or someone like that, who would then go through and either tick the boxes or not. So it was more like appraisal, and not appraisal as we see it today where it's performance development, but it was more performance management stuff. So clinical supervision then became something totally different to what it was supposed to be when it first started. So there are some historical scars that come with the term.
That's probably a bit scary for us because there are two major health department policies that are now mandating clinical supervision. So the suicide one for mental health nurses and the seclusion and restraint recommendations are both saying basically that mental health nurses will be required to have clinical supervision. So
Absolutely. And there are other policies for other people, like child and family health nurses are mandated to have clinical supervision of the reflective type. Midwives working in continuity of care models are also required to have it, and other midwives should have it made available to them. So it is quite, you know, the complex sort of thing.
once you make it mandatory, there's
Yes. You also run into other issues of, as you said, it's always better when the person wants to come and they're participating willingly. But if once you get to people who are there because, you know,
They
the
have
boss
to.
said I had to, then that can also interfere with it. Yep. What else might interfere with the process?
Was it a past experience with that particular person? Like,
Yep.
would it be better if you had someone who you hadn't met before?
Yes.
A bit more impartial?
So, like you need to have a judicial think about who is going to be whose supervisor. Yes, that's right. And in most supervision, they say it shouldn't be someone who's certainly not your direct manager. and even someone who's not even in your management structure. There are some difficulties around that, but certainly they're issues to be considered. Do you think that the very fact that there is no definitive definition, like there's no totally accepted definition of what clinical supervision is, also contributes to some of the confusion? Yeah. Because there are people who think clinical supervision, that's when my preceptor sits beside me at the bedside and teaches me how to do things or tells me I'm doing them wrong. And we see this with our new grads, is that, clinical supervision, what does that mean? I have a precept, or I have, that sort of stuff. But then when you get them there and say, well, this is actually protected reflective time, or whatever, they look at you and they go, well, what happens with the preceptor? Because there is no line, there's no, so the words clinical supervision in themselves, because there is that lack of definition, can create a whole lot of fear and anxiety around going. I agree. Anything else that you think might, no, let's move on then. We'll move on to the next one. So is everyone happy with those as our core principles of supervision? Yeah? So what is the role of the supervisor in this process then? So we've talked a lot about the supervisee and that sort of stuff. You guys are all supervisors, and I'm assuming that as supervisors you're also supervisees in situations as well. Is everybody having clinical supervision? Who does clinical supervision? No? Okay. What do you think are the advantages or disadvantages of that?
I only see disadvantage. We don't have anyone available to do it.
Yeah. So there are some issues. From a personal point of view, I actually participate in all three forms of clinical supervision, so bedside, professional development and reflective. I don't have bedside supervision anymore because I actually don't do much bedside nursing. That's the reality of my role and my situation. But I certainly do have a professional have someone that I go to for supervision around my professional development, and I also have other people who I go to who are my reflective supervision. We do peer supervision rather, but I actually participate in monthly reflective supervision as well.
When you get old, unfortunately my supervisor has retired.
Oh, that's annoying.
I know.
So then you have to find a new one.
Well, the trouble is the skill level isn't there.
Absolutely, yes.
That was the problem.
Sometimes you have to go outside, and that's why I actually participate in a peer supervision. So with a nurse educator from Nepean and another nurse educator from Justice Health. We get together on a monthly basis and we meet, and we're all very experienced clinical supervisors and that sort of stuff. And so it's not about one person leading the other one, but we're all, we're all going to go, hey, hang on, we'll call each other on our non-reflection or whatever it is that needs to be done. So sometimes as you develop the skills, you don't actually need a supervisor, but you need a peer supervision group. Might be the answer for that.
A safe space.
It's still a safe place. There's still people to sort of talk about stuff and whatever. There are still people there who are experienced supervisors who are going to say, hang on, because we all know, particularly once you're an experienced supervisor, you know the ways around some of those sorts of things, And often I find if someone practices their clinical supervision on me and they're not as experienced, and I'll skip around something or whatever and they'll move on and I'll just think, I wouldn't have let me get away with that, So there are things that you can do, So there are ways to do it. But what is the role of the supervisor? So I've given you some information there. So what do you think the role of the supervisor is?
Enabler.
An enabler? Yep.
To listen and
Yep.
be fair.
Sorry?
Fair.
To be fair? Yep. Yes. They need to be fair, certainly in bedside clinical supervision, yes.
And not really like look at the person from just your viewpoint, not anyone else. Like say for example, someone else told you, oh, this nurse is really crap, she needs to be supervised. So maybe not go so much on what other people have said, just go from what you
Yeah.
are going to see.
Yep. So you need to be neutral in your
Yeah.
approach,
Mm.
is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Okay. Anything else? I found this great meme. For those of you who are too young to know, this is from the movie The Matrix.
Oh,
We're not that young.
Pardon?
Yeah, I love Matrix.
Pardon?
I love the Matrix.
You love The Matrix? Yeah, me too. But yes, so, but there are some people who are thinking, where does that come from? It's from The Matrix, yeah, so, which has nothing to do about supervision, but it's a great meme. So it says, being a supervisor is more than making sure employers take their breaks. It's leading by example, looking for ways to improve the workplace and improving morale among co-workers.
Culture.
Culture, yeah, it's part of the culture, yeah. Would you agree? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, keeping that in mind, let's talk about what does a supervisor actually bring to clinical supervision?
Experience.
Experience? Yep. What else?
Compassion.
Compassion? Absolutely, one would hope so, yes.
Empathy.
Empathy? Yes.
Presence, you know, to be with the person in that moment.
Presence?
Yeah.
It certainly, if you're going to have an effective supervision, then session, then yes, the supervisor needs to be present, just as the supervisee needs to be.
The ability to adapt to personality.
Adaptable, yes.
Knowledge and understanding.
Knowledge and understanding, yeah. What else?
Open mind, you know.
Open
Whatever
mind,
comes your way.
yes. What else?
Probably not threatened, so by anything.
What do you mean, not that they're not threatened, or
Yeah,
they're not
so-
threatening?
No, so that like whatever the person brings up, they'll deal with. sort of
Yes.
thing, So that the person doesn't feel like they can't say something.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's
yeah,
going
yeah.
to- yeah.
So approachable
Yeah.
and available.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. What are some of the things that a supervisor might bring that's not necessary? Oh no, we'll get to that in a minute. Anything else that you think a supervisor should bring to? No? Okay, so what supervisor attributes or skills actually support the effectiveness of clinical supervision?
Communication skills,
Communication skills, yeah.
rapport building.
Building rapport, yeah.
Patience.
Patience, yes.
I don't mean patience.
Sorry? Good listening skills, yes.
I think that respect amongst staff that you're not going to be gossiping or spreading information or stuff.
So integrity,
Yeah.
yes.
That honesty, integrity.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. As a supervisor, you need to show great integrity so that people will feel comfortable to come to you knowing that you aren't going to talk about what everybody else has said to everybody else
That
about
would
it.
be breaching confidentiality anyway. Like as a supervisor, you
Yep,
cannot spread
It would be,
that.
but you need to actually be visibly,
Owner,
Yeah.
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 that sort of stuff. So, but I agree with you, it breaks confidentiality and all the rules of supervision, yes. Anything else?
I feel like the ability, like to, like obviously if you're more senior than them, to kind of remind them that you're once in their position, kind of thing like that, feeling like that there's not necessarily always this hierarchy or that you feel like you're on the same, I think in some ways on the same level. So that,
Yes?
you know, even though you're a mentor and a leader, you're also that the equal respect, not the respect that you get because they're
Yeah.
higher than you. Just
So relatedness?
Yeah, the equal respect.
So they need to be able to relate
Yeah.
or feel that you can relate to them. So
Yeah.
that shared, you know, just because I'm in a senior position doesn't mean that I haven't done more senior position or been here longer, doesn't mean that I don't understand
How
all
you
those
feel,
things
yeah.
that are going on for you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What other attributes or skills support effective clinical supervision.
Time management, you need to be, you know, like if you've got an hour, you've got to have that
Yep.
skill of keeping your time.
Yep.
You know,
Keeping the session on track.
that's right.
Yep.
The dates.
Yes, that's exactly
That
right.
organisational skill that,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah, that's exactly right. Anything else?
Not getting enmeshed in the problem either, so, yeah.
Okay, so
Boundaries,
not being boundaries, having
Yeah.
boundaries, yes. So you can, and this is certainly in reflective supervision, but in all supervision, is that you can listen to them and you can help them to reflect and you can help them to resolve their issues or to gain the skill, all that sort of stuff. But you shouldn't become emotionally invested in that process. You need to keep your objectivity. Yes.
I
Yep.
think testing that, being able to assess what they need from the session. So like, if like, so today, do they need just reflection, or today, do they need just a bit of advice? Like,
Yep.
you guys don't always try and fix everything, because like, sometimes they just need to, they do just need to vent a little bit.
So that
It's assessing the needs of the person.
so assessing the needs, you know, that sensitivity to what the person needs. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
So, and it's true with supervision. Sometimes they do need you to help them come up with a solution, or that. Sometimes they just need you to help them see what the situation actually is.
It's also being self-aware. Like I know that myself. I'm a bit of a fix-it person. I'll
Yeah.
just try and fix everything, and I've been told sometimes just to kind of shush and just let me talk. Just let me listen.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. There's also that whole thing that any solution you offer them will not. That any solution they come up with themselves will actually be more effective than a solution that you've offered them. It's really difficult to do that though. Interestingly enough, I've just found that I was just the other day came across a YouTube thing on leadership about the butterfly story. Check that one out. Yeah, I think you might find that very interesting. But I digress. What supervisor attributes or skills can derail clinical supervision? So what are the things that a supervisor has to be aware of not to do so that they don't derail the whole supervision thing?
Not to be judgmental.
Not being judgmental, yeah.
Attitude.
Attitude? What do you mean by attitude?
I mean, like,
Expand on
anyone
that.
is going, alright, let's go ahead and do it. Or something. Like body language, everything's the
Yep. Yes?
Not to just lecture. You're not there to lecture people necessarily. I don't know. I had somebody complaining about clinical supervision this morning, and they said they've got like just. She said, I was like, we're being yelled at, but not yelled at. They're just being
Talk down.
told off, pretty much. So they didn't see that as useful. That session.
And not actually the process of clinical supervision, even the bedside stuff, you know, if we're going to go back to our core principles of being constructive and collaborative, then it needs to be a conversation rather than a I tell you, you know. Supervision should be supervisee based, you know, like they should be the focus, not the supervisor. The supervisor is just there to keep the conversation rolling, in my view, you know. And how you do that or don't do that can have a profound effect on how the session and how effective the session is for the people involved. Okay, anything else? No? Alright, so having had that conversation, let's look at developing some skill, like as supervisors, look at how we're going to maybe develop some of our skills. So this needs group work. So does someone want to actually, can I get one of you guys to go over there? So we've got 3, 3 and 2. Okay, and
How convenient.
makes it easy for name memory, yes. Okay, so what I want you to do in your groups is to identify a skill or attribute that you'd like to enhance for your next clinical supervision session. So think about what is my next planned supervision session? What do I need to require at? And what is a skill or an attribute that I'd like to enhance for that session? Because the aim of these leader sessions is to have something to take away that you could use this afternoon or tomorrow. Okay? And then, in the group, have a conversation about how you're actually going to achieve that enhancement. Go. You have... No, we're not. Let's not talk about it. Let's not get bogged down in the politics of whether there is skills supervision. So we don't necessarily even have to have reflective supervision. Just when next time you're going to be talking with someone in a clinical supervision, whether it be professional development, reflective process, or a clinical skills process. As the supervisor, yes.
Should be just the new staff and new grads. I don't find myself being very patient. Like someone can do something, I just want to instead of taking the time to still now on the floor. First thing to be happy when
how you going? Yeah. Yep. Yep.
yours is mainly
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you're right, and we'll talk about this in the group, but certainly when you're doing supervision, you need to actually have boundaries, and even a structure and process that both parties understand completely. Yeah, and agree with. Yeah, absolutely. It's good.
I suppose different things within different
The main thing, like you said, is getting the supervisors to open up and then using their skills to grow up.
I'm just listening, making sure you're...
They feel safe enough.
Would you be supervising,
So,
like managing the supervision, like say,
questions.
you manage that and that would delegate and
probably if I had my seems to be the I had
Oh, that one, I got it. You know what I mean? I see what you're saying, right? So you can base
Yep. And I would things, but then some of the other ones like DBT ones.
is it depending on them?
Teaching us to practically use
Someone told me
Why?
so that was part of that process.
So you don't do that with your staff, with CNEs or anything like that, You probably do it in a not so formal way. Yeah.
Would it be enough to You would discuss it.
This is going back 3 years ago.
Okay.
But they,
All right.
I I like chocolates.
Yes.
But have you heard
Yeah.
of something on others?
Yes. So when people come up to you and they go, this is what I'm doing, and that sort of stuff, is it right? This doesn't feel right, or when you see someone whose practice is not as
I urgently
up to scratch as you'd like it to, then that in itself is a clinical supervision. Yes. So it's about so I'm not asking you all to, just because I know not all of you are reflective supervisors and have done training in that, but generally as nurses and midwives, that's part of it. We don't even realise we're doing that, and we do. So it's being about being about. If you don't know that sort of stuff, well, think about then if you're going to supervision or you're looking at people who that supervise. What are the things that they do or don't do that you think? Well, if I was going to, that appeal to you, like the things that they do that you think are really good. So if I was going to be doing supervision for someone else, what are the skills that I might take from my own, from the people who do my clinical supervision? Does that make sense? Yeah. So.
I feel I do that already. Pretty well. I've seen my issues.
I don't say. I can talk
always.
I've done this.
Like for well-being, like legal things, get it out there rather than how they take it and doing it.
Okay, so come up with some actual concrete strategies on how you might do that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Just give these guys a few more minutes.
We were like in really stressful jobs where actually pain, psychologists to do it.
If you provide it, if you get for I know for nurses and whatever, if you get it out of your, if you pay for it and you get it outside of your workplace, you can actually apply for it. Yeah.
Because I think the police do that with other kind of yoga.
Actually, police, firemen, all that sort of stuff are far better at clinical supervision than mental health is. Yeah, like that whole
and
reflection.
It's interesting that we're in health.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's not.
It's
this is our core.
Yeah, I know.
Talking to people, relating to feedback.
Yeah, this woman came and did a presentation at Red Bank, and she I can't remember her name actually, she's retired now, but she did group clinical supervision for some of the community and stuff, and they found her wonderful. She was really brilliant.
Yeah.
She just did a wonderful presentation just about the whole concept.
That might break down barriers.
Yeah, well, this was like about
They fit in the back. Then
so this was to sort of combat what happened like 3 seats.
Yeah.
3 seats fit in the back.
Things change and evolve. People are trying forward.
Bring that point up about the we'll talk about the fact we're in health and other people do it better and whatever in the general conversation, because there's much to say about that. All right, has everyone sort of got an idea?
Yeah.
Okay. Would anybody like to share what their thing is? It's a very small, intimate group, So share about the discussion. You don't have to share your individual goals, but just the discussion that you had at your individual tables, if you want. Pardon? No, I'm talking to the whole room.
I think the most important thing is openness. Because with openness, that way you can set constraints and you set boundaries, and everybody, when they come in, they know how far they can go, what they can discuss and talk about. And if everybody is in agreement, well, then we can proceed, and perhaps it'll be very fruitful. And it cleans the air.
Absolutely.
That's primarily
the
start, the basic principle.
It is true, like with any group, particularly with group, but certainly with individuals as well, you actually need to have ground rules. that you set for your clinical supervision about who, when, where, how, what, that sort of stuff, you know. And everyone needs to be in agreement that that's going to happen. If it's a one-on-one, then that can be, you know, that there still has to be an agreement, you know. But it can be, like, it doesn't have to be, you know, like, for my TPP clinical supervision, I actually have like a ways of working, which I've shared with some of the other clinical supervisors. And it basically says, you know, be respectful, you know, turn off your phone, turn up on time, all those sorts of things. This is confidential unless, you know, responsible confidentiality, so that what's said in the room is kept in the room unless someone's at risk, and then we talk about taking it out of the room and those sorts of things. So some ground rules that need to be set. But if it's just if it's a one-on-one mentoring situation, then you might go, okay, when you first set it up, it's like, well, what are the rules? Where are we going to have it? You know, are we going to go somewhere, have a cup of coffee, have a conversation? Does it need to be in a private room? You know, how often are we going to meet? Who's going to instigate the meetings? Those sorts of things need to be set up at the beginning of the supervision relationship. Absolutely. Yep.
Allowing the supervisee to come forth with the solution, and so to
Yep.
be, you know, even though you might know,
Yep.
it's better to stay back.
Yes.
And allow them to come out.
So being more mindful of actually letting them come up
Yeah.
with the solutions rather than us, because we're
Charging in.
trying to, nurses
Trying to
and
fix
midwives, we love to fix, you know, make it better, that sort of stuff, repair, So sometimes it is being very mindful about taking that step back and going, you know, before I talk, is this the moment to talk? And when I do talk, what is it that I have to say? I know in reflective clinical supervision, in a lot of cases, the person who trained me always said that when you're a supervisor, you should go in as a curious inquirer. So you don't need to be invested in it, you don't need to be, you know, you're just asking questions. And the point of the question is to get that person talking. And that applies across all of the, you know, it's like even with a clinical skill acquisition, you know, we're watching somebody do a skill, we have to do an assessment or whatever. It always goes better when you're doing that feedback, that clinical supervision conversation afterwards of, so how do you think you went? And getting them to actually start the ball rolling. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's a very, very good point to remember. How are you going to do that, Zelka?
Ensure you're probing and effectively gently.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, yeah. No, what are specific strategies that you are going to...
Can you tell me?
Yep.
Can you tell me, you know?
Yes.
So what about
Blah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
do you think that?
Do you think that? Need to be really careful with do you think, because you don't want to lead them into it.
Okay.
I always sometimes if I think I'm going to lead people where I want them to go, and we're very good at that, you know, is to go, I'm curious, what about, you know? So then you're actually giving them the opportunity to continue on their own path. And sometimes we also have to just let them go their own path, even though we think, no, that's not the way to go. This is the right solution for you. They may take a path. Like we want to go from here to here, and they will take the path that goes like this, and it may take a couple of sessions, and finally they get back to where you think, where you knew they needed to go, but they have to have made the journey themselves.
That's okay to do, however, if the patient safety is at risk, then
Absolutely. But if patient safety is at risk, you don't do that sort of conversation beside the patient or whatever.
yeah.
You need to intervene and go,
Or you could just, so say for example, you're clinically supervising someone,
Yep.
and then you find like, oh no, this person's really unstable. You could just flip it and take over that, use
Yep.
it as you doing it and teaching the supervisee, as opposed to
yeah.
you know they're unstable.
But how would you do that?
You could just stop them and say, hey, I don't think
This is the question, see? This is what I'm asking you for. They're like, we have these nebulous ideas,
Yeah.
but I'm actually looking for what are the
How
things...
practically to do it.
How practically to do it, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Without crushing that person
Yeah.
so they
So
run
you
out of the
can
room
probably say-
crying, and that you don't then totally blow the
Annihilate.
patient, annihilate the patient's trust in that person as well.
Yeah,
Mm.
permission. Do you mind? Can I get
Yeah.
permission?
Well, you can't really say, can I get permission, can you?
Do you mind?
Because you're saying no, it has to stop.
But there's a way. Okay. Can I show you a different way? Or?
Yep.
Yeah.
Can I show you a different way?
Or can you say, can I stop you there? And so, for example, someone's doing something quite obviously wrong.
Yep.
So how do you stop it right there and say, that's it, this has to stop, I have to take over and do it? How's
I'll show you how to do
Well,
it.
if we proceed, can I just show you something? Or like,
But they're not going to proceed. You've already evaluated that they're really unsafe. And
But
they're
then but the thing is, you can go, wait, hang on,
Yeah.
we need to stop this now.
Okay.
You can actually stop it,
Yeah.
but you need to do it in a way that's, like I said, it's not going to crush that
Mm.
person's confidence,
Yeah.
and it's also not going to make that patient think, oh, hang
What
on,
the hell's going on?
Yeah.
you know, and then go, I don't
Yeah.
want that person anywhere near me.
Yeah.
Because although they may be doing that thing in an unsafe manner,
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that everything that they do is unsafe.
Yeah.
So it's a fine line, you
Yeah.
know.
And generally, like, they'll stop at that,
Yeah.
like, milder thing. If the person was determined to continue,
Yes.
you might have to actually, like, be a
Yeah.
lot more firmer, but
Mm.
most people will actually stop at that point.
Yeah.
Because often people are getting anxious and realising they don't know what to do, which
Yeah.
is probably contributing to further
Yes.
mistakes and stuff as well. So
Yeah.
at that point, you often find that people are relieved that you're
When you say,
actually
hey,
showing-
hang on a minute,
Yeah,
Okay.
can I
what
show
to
you a
do?
different way of doing that?
Okay.
Because, God, you know,
Yeah.
it's about
And
time.
it's probably waiting for you to step in.
Yeah, that's right. And very few people, you know, there are some people, but most people have some idea that they're not, that this is the way it shouldn't be going. Like it seems to have gone some path that they don't want it to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they will respond to that quite gentle, can I show you a different way? Because most people will take it, particularly if you're like a more senior clinician, they'll go, oh, okay, I'm obviously not doing it right then.
Yeah.
You know, they will think that, you know, that sort of stuff. You know. But if they're determined to continue, then you need to go, no, stop.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to do it that way. Is the next way, is the next step. So that graded assertiveness.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. This table, you haven't had a chance to share yet? What you're thinking, what skills or attributes you would like to be thinking about enhancing? We had a different conversation, didn't we? You know, so do you want to share that conversation?
Well, I think I'm currently like in the process of a project. And
Yes.
I've kind of been, I guess, taking it on myself, you know, and I'm trying to teach people to like roll it out in the different wards. And when I rolled it out in the last ward, we had a good like discussion with the person I was working with. But then when I came back, she actually had a really good idea that I didn't think about, and perhaps I might have thought about, or we might have just figured out there and then if instead of dictating the plan, we had discussed the plan.
Yep.
And I guess people work in different ways, and so I'm doing another session tomorrow. So I'm thinking this time I might just try and discuss, because instead of saying this is how I want the project to go, say this is what I was thinking, but what do you think? Like what works best for you?
So that more collaborative
yeah,
approach
yeah,
to the instigation of it.
And the other
Yeah.
girl's idea worked out really well, and if I had thought about it, or that, you know, not that I didn't let it happen, but just I was just kind of
Yes.
rolling it out rather than letting it.
Organically
Grow.
grow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. That's a really good thing, you know. And we talked a bit about, you know, even though you think, oh, I'm not, you know, I don't know, I'm not doing much supervision or much formal stuff or whatever, start thinking about the people who you see around you that you admire or that supervise you. And think about what are the attributes about them that make them a good supervisor. You know, why do I keep going back to supervision with that person? You know, and actually sort of think like that, you know. It's like that role modelling sort of stuff. Does that make sense? And finally,
And we were discussing in the other professions like the police, ambulance, firefighters, they're all doing clinical supervision, and yet we're in health, this is our core business, yet we don't have it widespread, amongst our workforce. And
why
it's
do you
our
think?
core.
Why do you think that might be?
Well, the police do it outside the service.
They do it outside the
They go
service,
to
but they do it. You know.
But, but the supervision they're trying to have here, or they have here, is within the service with people that we know. See, they will go to an outside body or an outside group.
They often do.
And
Yes.
I think that is much better than doing it with people that you work
Yeah.
with surrounding you.
You're not an
How-
external auditing body.
No, the person who does their supervision, their clinical supervision, doesn't actually work in the police
It's not
force.
employed with the New South Wales Police Department.
Yes.
External.
It's an external.
Well, we'd be able to do that, but the other person doesn't know what it is they're
It's about, but that's about them having. It sort of depends, and the reason why, like, because AMBOs actually do it really quite well, and they do it by people employed by the ambulance service. But one of the reasons why other services do it better, or because they've been doing it for a longer time for us, is because there's quite overt dangers for them out there, psychologically, like physically, psychologically, and that sort of stuff. You know, they see things, they hear things, and that sort of stuff. And for a long time, particularly in health, like in nursing and in medicine in particular, and allied health and whatever, we just that's just part of the job. You know, there's nothing. You know, there's no big newsworthy event, and you know, very rarely is there a newsworthy event. But we collect the vicarious injury sort of thing. But because there's not that overt sort of stuff, it makes it harder to pitch it to the manager, like to management, to say, well, we need this because
So
we
you're
can't.
saying we should innately have it? Or people's perception is that we innately have all this?
No, what I'm saying is that they think that people are just going to deal, you know, with it. It's just part of the job, and you will deal with it, you know. But now, and for that's been the reality for quite a long time in health. But now they're starting to realise that there are a lot of people out there who have ongoing psychological trauma from this, not from any one big event, but from the continuous dealing with other people's health, psychological, that sort of issues. And that's why part of the reason why people burn out, why they leave nursing or midwifery or medicine or whatever, you know, because why would I do that to myself every day, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
The disturbing trend in suicide rates is actually one of the ones that
Male nurses.
and doctors.
Yes.
JMOs,
as well.
yeah.
Pardon?
Ambos
As
as well.
well.
Yeah, I know, but I recently read a thing to
JMOs.
say that the ones that the biggest spike increase in
Yeah.
suicide rates for health workers is in male in Australia is in male nurses.
Yeah.
What that is, or
Some they're actually saying there's risks in particularly perfectionistic type
Yes.
personality characteristics. So trying to do too good a job.
Yeah.
The other one that they're really honing in on is work-life balance.
Yes.
So making sure that, like for the TPPs and all of our new grads, we're really honing in
Yeah.
on you need to hand over to the next shift, and you need to also make sure you're going home, eating, sleeping properly,
Yeah.
and actually socialising with people who aren't at work as well, you know, in
Yeah.
that sense of having a lot more balance.
And-
Detachment
and-
sort of issue.
Yeah.
Do you think
And
You've
also,
got to be detached
like,
from what you do, otherwise you go bonkers.
Yeah.
so
Detachment, don't get emotionally involved with it.
Well, that's pretty hard. But what about debriefing?
I can detach quite
it's
easily.
all part of the process, but not everybody participates in that well. It's a big conversation, but
We're old time.
basically, but it's not just the new people. Like we talk about the new grads and that sort of stuff, but we're all quite senior clinicians in this room. You know, how many of you go home on time every day? Don't work on weekends or in evenings at home on your own work. not one of you, you know. So, and I am as equally as guilty of that. So it's not just about the new people. Like, we're entrenched in that, and we've been collecting vicarious, some of us have been collecting vicarious injury for a very long time, you know. But we want to try and instill it in the new generation, not to get to the point where we are. There's that sort of stuff. To be able to say, you know what, I've done my 8 hours and I'm going home, you know. I don't care that that project, that report is not finished. I can't fit everything into 8 hours a day. You know.
Just pass up.
That's exactly right. Actually, in my experience, it's passed down. All right. Any final questions? Yeah, I know. We're right at the end. Any final questions? Fantastic. What I want you to take away from this, found another great saying. Okay?
Yep.
And good luck with improving your clinical supervision. And if you haven't started it yet, good luck with starting it. You know. Okay?
Thank you, Ros.
You're welcome. Thanks.